Hey everyone, welcome to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, of course, brought to you by Circa Sports. Week 6 carnage in terms of injuries, whether it be running backs, wide receivers, a few quarterbacks as well too, and 6 teams on bye. That's what we're looking at here with a Week 7 slate that is going to be frustrating. Jake, I looked at the over-unders. 9 of the 13 games are going to be within 3 points, and then there's only 2 games above 45 points from an over-under perspective.
I think unders went like 9-2-1 this week. So
Yeah.
it's a good time to be betting the under, I guess. Even though I'm part of the life's too short train, but you know what? I guess the way the NFL's going, the way the refereeing, the officiating's going this week, it's under city all over the place.
Yeah, my against the spread record on the Tuesday article I write every week, it looks great. Just don't scroll down any further and see my over-under, which is like 10 games below 500. Because I'm with you. I'm living every day hoping for more offense, hoping for good football. I'm not sure we're seeing that this week, but we still have fantasy that we need to worry about. I want to hit the music, and we'll come back with what is sure to be probably one of the more difficult waiver wire pickups in recent memory. So stick around. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. You can follow Jake, who has made his return back from Vegas after a week off, at RotoJake on Twitter. We're going to talk about our waiver wire pickups, and we'll do it very quickly. I promise. Our listeners are very interested in knowing as soon as they can who to pick up. But real quick, what was the experience like at that Raiders trip from 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. No, Allegiant Stadium was awesome. It was one of the coolest places that I've ever watched football, though. I mean, I can't say I've watched too many places outside of Lambeau. We were the 200 level in the end zone. We were right below the stage, so I didn't expect to turn around and see a Warren G and Too Short concert at halftime, but I was very happy to get that. Indeed, that was that was quite the thing. They put on. I equated it to when China hosted the Olympics and they had that crazy opening ceremony. Yeah. I think they really showed out for national TV and the Monday Night Football crowd, and it was a cool thing to be a part of. Of course, the outcome wasn't quite what I had hoped, but Packer fans also just took over that city. Everywhere I went, every casino I went, it didn't matter where. There's a Go Pack Go chants going, and
cool.
we represented well. You could if I went to the bathroom and there was a cheer, I couldn't tell if I should be happy or sad because it was about equal, right? So overall, great place to watch some football. Fun time to recap that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Packers did not represent well, and I've completely gone off the rails. I don't know if you listened to the podcast last week. I'm out on Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur sucks. I'm already there as a Packers fan. So you'll have to bring me back. Obviously, we're only in week 7. Packers have think it's an interesting matchup against the Broncos this week. We'll have to talk about that next week because this week we have a lot of different waiver wire pickups and guys that I think it can really go either way. So because of that, and because we have 6 teams on bye, complicating things even further, we're going to change up our format a little bit. Typically, we always talk about the Monday Night Football game. I'm okay if we don't really do that all that much today. And
outside of cut Quentin Johnston, I don't think there's really anything to learn
there.
from the Monday Night Football game.
I'm ready to take my victory lap of L's on that one. And then also normally go quarterbacks right away. I think we stick to running backs almost immediately because there is such a tumultuous nature with those pickup options. I want to get our top 5 waiver wire pickups though out of the way right away. And I think the best way to do this, Jake, is just kind of going back and forth. You and I, who is your favorite waiver wire pickup this week?
So I kind of copped out and cheated and did Jordan Mason / Elijah Mitchell. But when it comes down to it, I'm actually picking Elijah Mitchell. And this is counterintuitive to what most people think, especially if you watch the snap distribution last week. And we can discuss this more when we get into the specific backs. But there's some reasons I like Elijah Mitchell. And I think Kyle Shanahan likes Elijah Mitchell a little bit more too, given that he is fully healthy and it looks like he's taking steps towards that. So I'm actually leaning Mitchell over Jordan Mason. Now, Mason had more practice time. You can say all of that. But those are the two that you're going to dial in on. And, if I could tell you, I could say this with maybe 55% confidence. One of these guys is the guy, and this is, of course, because Christian McCaffrey is out with his rib/oblique injury here.
Not out. With the language you're using.
All right, very careful.
He missed time Sunday due to the separate injuries. They play Monday night, so they'll have an additional day of rest. And of all the running back injuries we're going to talk about, there's a lot. There's probably more optimism CMC than there is anyone else. So just to be clear,
I've seen anywhere from miss 1 week, miss 2 to 4 weeks, and then of course this thing saying out. So I'm operating as if we're at least not going to have him on Monday Night Football, and then they'll save him for the extra week, which is why I'm ranking the Niners backups number 1.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but I actually do have Jordan Mason as my top pickup this week. I would take him over Elijah Mitchell as well, and I think Kyle Shanahan really does care about the hot hand, and in this case, I think it is Jordan Mason. But we'll discuss the breakdown of both those guys.
And stay tuned for FAAB bids and all this stuff. We just want to get a top 5 quick out of the way right off the bat when everyone's listening.
Who is your number 2 option if we're saying that we're going to combine the 49er running backs?
Yep, I actually put Craig Reynolds down as number 2. I like him because David Montgomery, again, he's injured again. He's always banged up here. And, when I wrote this down, Jahmyr Gibbs had also missed 2 consecutive games with a hamstring injury. Yep. Maybe he's looking a little bit more optimistic here. But even if Gibbs comes back, I don't think he's suddenly going to come back from a hamstring injury and get 20 carries. I think we have at least 15 touches for Craig Reynolds, provided David Montgomery misses. And all signs seem to indicate that he has a better chance of missing than McCaffrey. So I'm going to another backup, Craig Reynolds there.
Yeah, and that one actually almost is. It's not like he's listed as out, but I would sooner assume by Thursday we'll find out that Montgomery's on injured reserve or out for. I don't know if it's that serious, but I do not think David Montgomery is playing this week for the Lions. So I agree with you. Craig Reynolds is my number 2 selection. Jahmyr Gibbs and Dan Campbell, head coach Lions, had said Jahmyr Gibbs is almost guaranteed to be back next week. And you think about this season when Montgomery missed 1 game, Gibbs had, I think, 17 carries and a couple of catches.
Yep.
I don't think that's happening again. I think Craig Reynolds is going to be more of a factor. I think.
Yep. Don't mess around with hamstring injuries. And they were already being conservative with his usage early on until they couldn't anymore. I don't think they're going to mess around too much. Netflix or whatever we want to call it, Craig Reynolds has a role.
Yeah, I get concerned that he can't replicate David Montgomery's role, though, especially in the red zone. At 5'10", 215 pounds, you wouldn't think that's the bruiser. And I don't know why Leonard Fournette hasn't signed with the Lions at this point, because I think that's actually the guy that would fit very well. I actually think
Leonard Fournette could tie into my next pick, my number 3.
Oh, okay. Who's your number 3 guy?
And that's Zach Evans of the Rams. Now, you might think, Zach Evans, who the heck? What's going on here? Well, we know Kyron Williams is probably going to miss this week. I think he's been ruled out. I'm pretty sure he's been ruled out.
Or at least hasn't been ruled out yet, but that one's
an ankle
the
thing.
most obvious.
It looks like he's going to get ruled out. Ronnie Rivers has a PCL sprain. So really the last guy left is Zach Evans. Now, there's a practice squad guy, Royce Freeman, I believe, who's around. I'm not really afraid of him. It seems like the Rams, we said this at the beginning of the year in our over-under show, how they're a team that should be rebuilding but doesn't believe they're rebuilding. And they're 3-3 right now, so they're definitely not out of it. I could see them going out and trying to make a move on a guy like Leonard Fournette here. So that's where I'd be watching Leonard Fournette. But as things currently stand, Zach Evans with maybe a little dose of Royce Freeman. Excuse me.
Yeah, and Royce I should be clear, the reason this happened is because I dropped Leonard Fournette in our super deep Dynasty League and in another Dynasty League where it's 30 roster spots. That's the only reason why Leonard Fournette is actually trending, because I did finally drop him last week, and now I would have to spend major fab if he signs somewhere. I liked the other end of the Rams backfield. I like Royce Freeman more than I do Zach Evans. And you talked about what the Rams' nature of this season would be if they were 1-5 or even 2-4 and kind of committed to seeing what they have from a young talent perspective, like Jim Coventry and I discussed last week with Amari DiMercato, which was not correct, by the way, and we'll talk about that. Maybe that guy, we
didn't know Keontae Ingram would be back at that point either. So
yeah, and I think actually Keontae Ingram is part of my top 5 list as well, and I forgot to include him initially. I think the Rams want to be competitive, and I think Royce Freeman is the better running back. And you're like, well, what do you mean? Royce Freeman's been around 4 or 5 years, Joe. He's been a guy that's tossed around as much as Josh Dobbs does, Cardinals quarterback. They're both good players, right? Like, Dobbs been in that spot for a reason. Royce Freeman has been in that spot for a reason. I always call myself a Mario Puig disciple. I know you are as well, too. Mario is a complete stand for Royce Freeman and has always been kind of a little bit of a fade on Zach Evans dating back to his days with Ole Miss specifically. So I think Royce Freeman actually could be a thing. But just like the 49ers backfield, and I think just like what's going to happen with the Lions backfield, they might get split to an extent that none of these guys are fantasy viable. So while we might talk about 5 different running backs to pick up this week, if you were to say, I know definitively 3 of these are getting 10 points, I'd say you're wrong. There's you can't.
I mean, that's the side effect of doing the show on Tuesday, right? I mean, because the biggest pickup of the week isn't going to get settled till Monday night, and so much can happen between now and then. So we're going to throw out a ton of names, hopefully lead you in the right direction. You're probably going to need a little bit of luck too, and maybe you get lucky in one of those leagues has Thursday waivers, like our stake league, for example, where things are a little more conclusive at that point.
Yeah, and I guess just to give us a different element, again, I might have Keontae Ingram among my top 5 as well, because he seemed like the clear starting running back over popular waiver wire pickup last week, Mari DiMercato. Just to talk about other positions for a second, you had one tight end that probably cracks your top 5.
I threw Michael Mayer on this list. He's only 5% rostered on Yahoo. He's my number 4 pickup. Again, 6 teams on buys this week. So Bengals probably didn't have Irv Smith there. I could go through them all. Bengals, Cowboys, Titans, Jets, Panthers, Texans. Not huge name tight ends on there, but Michael Mayer he was someone heavily rostered at the start of the year. Wasn't really involved, and now suddenly is getting into the game. It looks like he is part of the game plan, and he actually looks good. He passed the eye test for me, and it's the Patriots, who surprisingly one of the worst teams in the league. But I like what I saw from Mayer's usage here, and while the Raiders' play has been encouraging of late, I feel like eventually they're going to get to a point where they're going to really stretch these young guys out, and I think Mayer passes the eye test, and it's he was already a target for dynasty leagues, but now I think I'm seeing some redraft value coming into play.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That makes sense. We'll talk about our boy Luke Musgrave when we get to the tight end section later on in the show. I'm having to drop Luke Musgrave in a few spots just due to roster constriction, which might
I was close last week, but I ended up dropping Jordan Love in several leagues last week.
Yeah, that's fine because he's not a good quarterback either. That's okay. We'll talk about tight ends more, and I think Michael Mayer is obviously a good choice. I wanted to just mention receiver real quick. It's certainly not as deep, but I think it's less confusing. If a guy like Rashee Rice, who was just under our 50% roster threshold and is our cover boy, if he's available, that's an obvious pickup, and I think finally is defining himself as the number 1 receiver for the Chiefs. I would also mention Jackson Smith-Njigba, another first-round rookie receiver.
He's very interesting in terms of routes ran and snaps and target distribution this week.
And he fell below the 50% threshold.
He was 48% when I checked last night.
Bye. And I will take the L on the other rookie receiver, Quentin Johnston. If the Chargers couldn't figure it out with a Week 5 bye, how to get their first-round receiver involved, who was supposed to fit seamlessly in there for Mike Williams next season.
Herbert even had him wide open on one occasion. You couldn't seem to hit him. So
no, that's the Chargers doing Charger things, and I failed all of you for assuming the Chargers would be competent. That's on me. I take the loss. I'm sorry, Jake, and everyone else listening, to lead you astray, assuming an NFL team would recognize what they need to do, but clearly the Chargers suck.
Yeah, okay. And then number 5, I was going to go Rashee Rice, but that feels like a cop-out at 45% rostered. I like where he's heading in that offense in general, but my official number 5 pickup is actually going to be Sam Howell. There are there are definitely some quarterbacks that are getting started on bye. Sam Howell's only 38% rostered, and I saw this, Payne wrote this in his article. It's a great little thing for perspective here. In Payne's column, he wrote that Sam Howell is averaging more fantasy points per game than Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, and Joe Burrow. Yet he's 38% rostered here, and he gets a pretty good matchup at the Giants this week. So a lot of people are going to have to stream quarterbacks, and Howell is the first name I am typing in.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one too. Again, 6 teams on bye, so could be very complicated from a quarterback position. I want to take a break. We're going to get a sponsor here from our Blue Wire group in a second. Obviously, if you're watching the video, it'll be a brief break. Listening audio-wise, we'll come back in just a second. All right, we're back, and we ran through our top 5 list. We're going to expand things a little bit further. We're going to talk about quarterbacks. Andrew Guyman in the chat is asking some streaming options. We'll get there in a little bit too. I think it's most important to discuss the running backs in a bit more detail because there is a lot of different question marks, and frankly, you could be targeting 8 guys, and I think in deeper leagues you might have to because there is no guarantees, especially when we're doing the show Tuesday, as to who is going to start and who's going to get more playing time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I want to elaborate just a little bit more on the 49ers backfield because I think we both had some component of San Francisco as number 1 on our top 5 lists of overall pickups this week here, and granted, there's a lot of information, a lot of news can change since then. But let me run into why I picked Elijah Mitchell number 1 over Jordan Mason. Now, just to recap here, Mitchell only 12.7% of the snaps. He had 2 carries for -3 yards, 0 targets on 4 routes run. Meanwhile, Jordan Mason, 27.3% of snaps, 5 for 27 and a touchdown, 0 targets on 6 routes run. So you look at the box score and think, Jake, are you crazy? What the heck happened here? And I really had to check out some of the Shanahan press conference comments afterwards to make up my mind on this one, because right heading into the season, after week 1, Mitchell was 50% rostered in Yahoo formats. He was he was, because of what's happened in past years, he was regarded as the handcuff or the backup here to Christian McCaffrey. And I definitely took Elijah Mitchell in a 16-team league where I took McCaffrey number 3 and I reached for him too because I knew I was going to have to, because a McCaffrey injury that can happen ruins you in a 16-team league. But anyway, here's why I'm thinking Mitchell, and it's all about Shanahan's comments here. So there are a couple of things here. One, Mason got work because he had a full week of practice, whereas Elijah Mitchell was kind of coming back from a bit of a knee injury. So that explains at least why Mason got more work this week. And I think the offense is a well-oiled machine enough to say that whoever gets the work is going to be productive from a fantasy standpoint. No, they won't be McCaffrey. We can't roll out and project him for 23 fantasy points every week. But 10-15 seems like a reasonable floor. So whoever gets it is going to be productive. But the big thing here, and I saved this tweet actually from Jamie Eisenberg, who was at the Shanahan presser, and he asked Kyle Shanahan if he would be okay with Jordan Mason being the top running back if McCaffrey is out. Here's what he said: "Yeah, we'll see. Elijah earned a ton with us over the years. I think Elijah, when he has been healthy, has been as good of a back as there is. He's just had a hard time staying healthy, but I can't take away anything from JP." And so he goes on and on, but he's basically asked Jordan Mason, can he be the lead back? And he used that opportunity to talk exclusively about Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, that's true.
That would be I don't think he's playing that big a 3D checkers or 3D chess with that misdirection there, really. He's at the presser. He's answering the question right away.
Right.
I think that Elijah Mitchell, provided that he can get a full week of practice in and that he didn't have any setbacks this past week, I think Elijah Mitchell is going to be more than Jordan Mason in this situation here. And maybe they have a split. Maybe they're both productive, which is certainly possible in this offense here. But that's why I'm leaning Elijah Mitchell as my number 1 pickup. Hearing it straight from the coach, when he was asked about Jordan Mason, he changed the topic to Elijah Mitchell immediately. So that seems to tell me something.
I hadn't seen that. That's great. I actually agree with you. I'm changing my number 1 list now. I'm going to have Elijah Mitchell number 1. Jordan Mason might be number 2. And that's the interesting part with this, because we'll talk about a bit more with the receivers later. But Deebo Samuel injured, and I think his status seems less certain. I think he is less likely to play Monday than Christian McCaffrey is. And if Deebo Samuel is out and Christian McCaffrey is out, it's entirely possible you have to have Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell get involved.
There's 15 touches for both of them.
Right. Defenses
absolutely.
could pretty easily key on George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. So that's another part of this that really complicates things from the 49ers offense. They play the Vikings on Monday. Great matchup. Obviously,
it's a matchup that you want. 100%
Monday complicates things as well. You couldn't draw up a more gross and frustrating situation than what fantasy managers are going to have to deal with the 6 teams on bye, a critical team playing on Monday, and a coach like Anthony from the chat mentions and Kyle Shanahan, who typically does not give a whole lot of information that helps people from the fantasy or gambling community. Yeah, it's very tricky. I won't lie. It's a very tricky spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about that. And it's definitely going to change, and it's going to mold quite a bit between now and then. But if I'm in the leagues that so I guess, personal experience. If I have McCaffrey and I don't have Mitchell, I'm making a pretty hefty FAAB bid. I'm talking 15 to 20%. And backing it up with a 12 to 17% on Mason.
I might even just go 15-15 on both and just say
let the chips fall.
Yeah,
the decision making's out of your hand. I like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 50. And if I get both, that's fine, because there's going to be a point where one emerges as the clear guy, and I will not feel like I wasted FAAB to solidify and secure which one of those will be the top guy.
If I don't have McCaffrey, my bid is probably a little bit less, maybe 8 to 12%. Okay. Because the thing is you can get 5 to 6% bids on a bunch of these other guys that we're talking about, and you're going to end up with someone probably of quality,
Yeah, I think even less. And there's going to be the top option here with the San Francisco guys, because the offense is pretty good. Historically, Kyle Shanahan knows what to do, even with lesser running backs, and they have a great matchup. But I think there's 5 other guys that we have to speculate on, typically on Wednesdays, right? If we're saying polling our audience, when is waiver wire FAAB? It's either Tuesday or Wednesday for a lot of people. So you will have the option to pick up somebody for free, I think, later on. Absolutely. As more information comes out.
And the running back list that we have is one of the most extensive. There are a lot of committees that are evolving, and there are a lot of people we thought were RB2, where when you take a deeper dive at the box score, are creeping up into RB1, at least on their team territory or even timeshare. So there's a ton of guys in that sense that we can discuss.
Yeah, let's get to that Lions backfield again. For us, Craig Reynolds was number 2 among the waiver wire top pickup options, and that's because David Montgomery left with a rib injury. Head coach Dan Campbell seemed to suggest that Montgomery was not going to play this week against the Ravens. Jahmyr Gibbs had missed 2 consecutive games with a hamstring injury. Campbell had said more or less that Gibbs will be back, but I think there's going to be room for a second running back to emerge, and Craig Reynolds has been the guy thus far. Mm-hmm. The backup to Craig Reynolds right now is Devine Ozigbo, if you remember him from the Jacksonville Jaguars days. Not a guy at all.
No, exactly. I wrote Ozigbo into the outline before Campbell had spoke on Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay. And when all I had known was he had missed 2 weeks, it's a hamstring injury, and Campbell hasn't said anything yet. Obviously, that changed. I can probably erase Ozigbo from your list.
Well, that's why I go back to the Fournette thing. Like, Fournette's a better player than Devine Ozigbo. And you can say whatever you want about Fournette, but I would much rather have Fournette.
And the Lions are clearly contenders, right? Yeah, so I guess they would be in play. They're more. I mean, we can tell from the outside that there are more serious contenders from the Rams. I think the Rams believe. Sean McVay has got those guys believing that they are just as serious of contenders here. But no, Craig Reynolds is the only option there. I had him as number 2, and I think there is some red zone work and there is touches for him, even if Gibbs is around. Because the only downside here, of course, it's a pretty tough matchup. They're on the road at Baltimore. So that makes things
it's tough, but it's not that tough. And they're coming off the London travel, which, as you remember from the Packers last year, can completely decimate lesser teams. The Ravens are not a lesser team like Matt LaFleur's Packers.
Yeah.
But, that travel stuff really makes a difference. The Bills were coming off it last week, only scored 14 points against the Giants team that could have started you on the defensive line.
Yeah. Oh, boy, I don't know about that. I could take space, but I don't think I can move people anymore like I used to. Oh, yeah, God, I can't even imagine taking an NFL.
So 15% on the 49er guys is more or less what we were saying either way. It's less for the Lions and specifically Craig Reynolds. I think because there are 7%, so many options.
8%?
I'm going to go like a $4 bid. I'm going to go like a $4 bid to make sure that I think Reynolds plays. And even if they sign Fournette, I think Reynolds does enough. And Montgomery might miss more than 1 week. So that factors in a little bit more.
Yep, exactly. I do have Montgomery in a league, but I also happen to be using my IR spot on James Conner in that league. So we're in we're in a tough spot. But you know what? Everybody's in a tough spot. There's carnage this week, so we're definitely not alone in that. So the thing is I was thinking maybe go 6 on Craig Reynolds, but is Craig Reynolds really any more attractive than Zach Evans or Royce Freeman of the Rams here? Because it's very, very similar situations here.
Well, this is the tricky part because the dynasty community loves Zach Evans. He was a 5-star recruit back in high school. Really disappointed from a collegiate perspective, but everyone knows Zach Evans with all the highlight films and tapes that he had. And I think it's a conflict it's a contrast in how people play the game and what they think about, because you're thinking Zach Evans, high school standout, Royce Freeman, multi-year journeyman, a guy that just has stunk for a while. I don't think it's that comparable. I don't think it works that way.
Evans has arguably better opportunity, but Reynolds, we've at least seen it from in short bursts in the past year. So that's why I ranked him the way that I did. But yeah, Zach Evans, Royce Freeman, Leonard Fournette, who knows what the heck could happen here. But just to reiterate, if you missed this at the beginning, Kyren Williams got an MRI on his ankle. He's going to miss at least week 7 with an ankle sprain. Ronnie Rivers, I don't know if they put him on the IR already, but it's looking like an IR stint due to a PCL sprain, which is typically a 4 to 5 week absence. Now, Evans had 4 carries for 10 yards on an 11% snap share. Of course, he's going to get help with the top 2 guys gone this week here. But and then, of course, the matchup here. You would think Pittsburgh on paper is decent against running backs. They're 24th in PPR formats and 26th in standard formats. So haven't exactly been great against opposing backs this week. So, and, like it or not, this is a Rams offense that made Kyren Williams into a top 5 fantasy running back.
Oh, yeah.
So whoever gets these carries is absolutely, is going to be doing something. The only concern is, of course, Zach Evans. First non-special team snaps of the year were last week. So, very raw, very new.
It's really tricky. Royce Freeman is going to be a better pass catcher too, which is kind of where the value for Kyren Williams lies. I was hoping that the schedule for the Rams would make it easy in terms of how long Kyren Williams is going to be out. It does not, Jake. The Rams have 3 more games and then they're bye. So if you were to say, hey, Kyron Williams is going to put you on injured reserve, you're talking about a 5-week span where he's going to miss time. I don't think the injury seems that severe.
We haven't heard the words high ankle sprain yet. So
right. And like if they're going to play it safe and that, like it doesn't work that way. I think I'm going of all these running backs, and I guess I'm in 15 leagues, Jake. I know you're in slightly less, but not many less.
What do I got? Like eight or
I
so
think Royce Freeman is going to end up being the most rostered running back out of all these leagues for me because he's going to be the cheapest to acquire. I would have to imagine in maybe all but 2 or 3, you can get him for $0. Wake up 4 a.m. on Tuesday or Wednesday and pick him up right away. I don't think you need to go ahead and be aggressive for it. And obviously, if Fournette signs with the Rams instead of the Lions or something like that, definitely don't need to.
Yeah.
But
the last thing you want to do
Freeman
is
might be
spend
just as good.
Yep, is spend 12% of your budget on a Zach Evans and then 2 days later have them sign Leonard Fournette.
It's the Amari DiMercato problem, which that's another backfield too. I think I would rather have Keontae Ingram because I have a feeling he's more of the starter. Now it's bad offense, but if you're doing it just by 1 week, and I think at this point you have to, Cardinals play the Seahawks, who have had a better defense, but I don't think everyone assumes they're just these world beaters because they held the Giants and Bengals to under 20 points, whatever it was. And Keontae Ingram was more involved just altogether. They even had Damian Williams. That's a real journeyman guy, just like Royce Freeman. Also see more snaps than DeMarco, or at least more touches.
I'm glad you brought up Keontae Ingram because somehow, I don't know if it was because of the late game or whatnot, but that kind of blew past me. He's only 20% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and he's right up there. He's clearly better and starting over DeMarcado there. So, I could easily see you spending more on Keontae than someone like Zach.
I think I'm changing my rankings. I think Keontae Ingram would be 3. I'm taking him over the Rams backs, but I want Craig Reynolds and I want the 49er backs over him.
Yep, fair enough. Yeah, he had 10 carries and 35.6% of snaps. DeMarcado 2 carries, but 45.2% of snaps.
All the pass catching and blocking work.
Yeah, he ran 24 routes, and then did all the and then Damian Williams only 16.4% of snaps, but still had 8 carries for 36 yards. So yeah, Keontae Ingram it definitely gets a spot on here. But now, after we've hit these interesting backfield situations, there are a ton of guys that are more established. Now, this is going to be more for 10 and 12 team leagues where these guys are available. I think when we get to 14 and 16 teams, these guys will be dried up. But we have to hit Ezekiel Elliott again, right? He's 43% owned. Ramondre had his best fantasy game of the year, and Ezekiel Elliott was still effective in that game. And, of course, then Ramondre did exit with head and ankle issues, ultimately cleared to come back. But Ezekiel Elliott's only 43% rostered. He's definitely someone that needs to be on teams. And I'm going to throw here, I'm taking the cheap way out here, and I'm going to throw the drop candidates from Jerry's backfield breakdown here.
Okay.
If you have Cam Akers, if you have Delvin Cook, if you have Jerick McKinnon, Samaje Perine, Josh Kelly, Damian Harris obviously carted off with a neck injury, hope he's okay, Matt Breida or Rashad Penny, obviously all those guys can be dropped at this point here. And you look towards guys like Ezekiel Elliott is one of them. Devin Singletary, I feel like we have to talk about because he's 12% rostered, so he's out there. He's out there for the taking. He outsnapped Dameon Pierce for the first time this year. That is significant. He also had more routes, 14 routes to 7 routes for Dameon Pierce, and the same amount of touches. Both had 13. Plus, it was Singletary in the game in crunch time there. So the problem is Houston has his bye this week, but then it gets Carolina, who's 31st against running backs, coming out. So very few of us are fortunate enough to be able to pick someone up and stash them this week with 6 teams on bye and all this injury carnage here. But we do have to hit Devin Singletary, even though he can't help you right away. Somebody more in the Ezekiel Elliott grouping, and this is probably the last time we get to talk about him, that's Tajay Spears. Yeah. I mean, he passes every eye test. He gets just enough usage with Henry being healthy. I have Spears in a dynasty and a redraft league. I picked him up 2 weeks ago after somebody else dropped him, got impatient, but this is the last week we'll be able to talk about him. He is a threat every week to score a touchdown because they design plays for him, and I think they're going to have to get even trickier here depending on how much time Tannehill has to miss.
We're going to talk about Rashee Rice a little bit later on in the show when it comes to receivers, and a separate rookie receiver that we've mentioned before, but is not on our spreadsheet, Jake. I wanted to surprise you with the push of the player. But it's the same vein of, I think, for Tajay Spears, where I would be trying to acquire this person now because not that Derrick Henry's going to go or like the Titans are going to trade him, although with Tannehill possibly out for a couple of weeks, maybe they do just kind of commit fully to the Titans sticking this year, and whatever Malik Willis and Will Levis look like, which is bad. That's gonna be very bad. Like I think Tajay Spears is gonna play more as the season progresses, and there's a few of these candidates that maybe this week, if you have somehow the roster capability of doing so, to make sure you acquire that and take advantage of what is going to be, I think it's unquestionably going to be the most difficult roster week there is. I would try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and if anything else, we put him on the outline just to say Tajay Spears shouldn't be your desperation drop if you can at all avoid it.
Yeah,
because I know people are going to think that and be forced into that corner sometimes, but he's definitely worth keeping around here. In another similar vein, I wanted to shout out Roschon Johnson. He's at 52%, so just misses our threshold, but he fell enough after missing week 6 with the concussion, but he's back and Khalil Herbert's still on IR, and he'll presumably be ahead of Devontae Foreman for carries, so definitely take a look at Roschon Johnson if you can.
How capped is the Bears offense when you have a quarterback named after a food item in Baguette, but not really, being your starting quarterback?
Isn't there an N in there?
It is, but I'm going to just call him Baguette because that's all that matters to me in this.
All I know is I can't wait to drop over to Vintage Brewing Company and remind all the Bears fans I have season-long bets with here, because I think they only need to lose 1 or 2 more times and I cash.
And you already get to cash in. That's that's the only issue with Roschon, and I think they might have to give him 20 carries and Foreman 15, because I don't know how that offense. And they play the Raiders this week. Like that should be just fine.
Yep.
But
the Raiders gave up 80 yards and a touchdown to A.J. Dillon, so.
Right. On 2 yards in the cloud, it felt like Ryan Grant all over again from the early 2000s, if that's the case.
Something like that, yeah.
We don't want – there's just too many running backs. I don't want to spend much more time on some of these less attractive options.
Okay.
But there is
Latavius Murray. Yep, I'll do it in a sentence. Yep. Yeah, Kareem Hunt, 36% rostered. Saw season high 38% snaps, season high in carries 12, season high in touches 15. Jerome Ford still outproduced him, but Hunt is getting more involved. And then, of course, Latavius Murray is only 14% rostered, but he had 47.5% of snaps compared to 50.8% for Cook. Just 2 less carries, even though he's a lot less productive. Cook also isn't really getting the red zone touches either. Right. And remember, Damian Harris was carted off the field with that neck injury. We hope he's okay, but Latavius Murray is back on the fantasy menu, boys.
Are you dropping Jerome Ford in 12-team leagues?
No.
Seeing what Kareem Hunt. Okay, good. Because I'm not either, and I'm actually not at all turned off by those results with Kareem Hunt. I think it's easier to have both those guys involved than just one doing Nick Chubb stuff.
Exactly. I'm just saying, with injuries and buys, I wanted to get through a big, long list of names for people to type in, so you have somebody that you can start with at least a slim degree of confidence this week.
Yeah, definitely a long list. And unfortunately, I don't think there's an easy conclusion or answer as we're doing the show Tuesday, but we have lots of different content on the site. I think we have waiver wire articles literally getting posted Wednesday, Thursday, and even Friday on RotoWire itself. And of course, you got a lot of different places where you can reach both myself.
I think there are Jake. 2 or 3 more waiver wire YouTube videos on this channel alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're just a long form podcast here, so we get to draw out our ideas a little bit after our big rankings here. But hopefully plenty of resources for you here.
Before we get to a receiver group that probably is lackluster relative to just the swath of running backs we just discussed, let's get a word from our sponsors, the place that you were at last week, Jake. Circa Sports. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. You can watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. That's going to be awesome. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game is all right there. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash, 3 stories of football glory, featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve your today at circalasvegas.com. You and I love going there. Obviously, you did get to spend time there.
So I've been to Vegas at least a dozen times, and I have never been there on an NFL football Sunday before.
I'm so jealous.
It was and it was surreal to go. I was there with some of my friends, my brother-in-law, a couple of his friends. I was like, guys, we have to, a couple of Vegas first-timers. I was like, 1, we have to go downtown, and we have to get a glimpse of what's going on downtown. But 2, the best place in the city to watch football is at Stadium Swim at Circa Sportsbook. And it's just a sight to behold. You couldn't believe it. You sit back and you are.
Was it as glorious as it seemed? Like just getting to chill in the pool, get to watch all those games, a lot of action. Did they have the Red Zone channel going?
What they did is they actually had the main national TV game because we were mostly there for the later games. I had a tough time corralling everybody in the morning. So they had the Chiefs game on, of course, the Taylor Swift game special, and then they kind of do their own cutting in and out based on how it's going. You know, they don't have the red zone up here, but it was but you can still see, of course, every single game that's on. You can watch whatever's there. You know, I had stake in Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, so I was watching that. But yeah, no, overall, just an insane experience. And I've already mentioned on this show, I will never pay for UFC tickets at T-Mobile again when I can go to Circa and sit and watch these UFC pay-per-views in the pool. I think it's the best place to do that. And it is, and you can run up the alcohol tab you want, and you still won't spend half as much as you will as a seat at T-Mobile there. Yeah, no, nothing but great things to say about Stadium Swim and
we're
our friends
obviously
at
sponsored
Circa.
by Circa Sports doing this stuff. This is not in the read. Like you and I legitimately love Circa. It's like I enjoy going there. I'm actually envious that you got to experience.
I didn't want to be the do you know who I am guy, but I'm thinking like, man, could I leverage the sponsorship somehow to like maybe not have to pay a cover for this group
with,
and whatnot?
Everybody though.
But no, I legit went in there as a private citizen and just did my thing, man. Had some fun.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about those receivers because there has to be something more than just all these running backs. And I mentioned Rashee Rice, who, of course, they played Thursday. So I think you kind of forget a little bit of what happened as all the action unfolded Sunday. I thought clearly developed into the number one receiver for the Chiefs. Kadarius Toney was featured very heavily in that win over the Broncos. But it was Rice that was making the critical plays opposite of Travis Kelce, much like we talked about at the start of the season when we were saying who are guys that we're targeting from a late round perspective. I loved Rashee Rice.
Can we fast track here because Kadarius Toney wasn't really featured that heavily. He had 3 catches and a touchdown, but he was
featured in the extent that they made plays for him, but he didn't do anything with the feature.
Now we need to remember that some of this was Justin Watson dislocated his elbow and left the game. Toney still only had 42% of snaps. Rashee Rice 47.8, Sky Moore 52.2, and MVS 56.5%. So And it was Rashee Rice who had a much higher route share than he did the previous week. So it's really tough to predict how this is going to go behind Kelce, but at least we know Rice is heading in the right direction, and it's probably the last chance we can talk about him unless he goes out here and has a dud because 45% Yahoo, people are figuring it out.
Yeah, I like him quite a bit. Then there's Trey Palmer, who we had talked about 2 weeks ago before you actually were on your Vegas trip and had said, hey, Mike Evans injured with the hamstring, but the Buccaneers are in a bye. So just keep that in mind. Well, Mike Evans played, Chris Godwin played, and yet Trey Palmer still was a thing.
Yeah, Palmer had as many targets as Godwin. Now, granted, Mike Evans was he was essentially the man here. Well, I mean, technically Godwin had more catches and yards, but Evans still had 10 targets. Baker's basically going to take his shots at Evans, a certain amount of times per game, and we're not getting away from that. But all of this is to say is that Trey Palmer is wide receiver 3. 64.8% snap share, 24 routes, 7 targets. Those are all top three with as many targets as Godwin here. Obviously, Mike Evans being fine doesn't necessarily help Trey Palmer's situation here. But Palmer is the wide receiver 3. He's 0% rostered in Yahoo leagues. There's a roster spot for him, and if you really need a flex in a pinch, you could do it if you had to.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that one. Then there's Wan'Dale Robinson, who really was more of a factor, and we did talk about the Monday night game or Sunday night game, I should say. I'm combining them. I just assume Daniel Jones is always on every primetime game possible.
Tyrod Taylor, though, this time. Or Tyrod.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we saw plenty of Daniel Jones' forehead on the sideline. Don't you worry, Jake. We can never miss that. Wan'Dale Robinson was a critical enough factor for the Giants' passing attack and got a few major targets. It was was it Sterling Shepard at the very end? That pass that got broken up that looked like it was wide open, but otherwise Wan'Dale Robinson really was a good factor.
Oddly enough, Slayton and Hyatt were on the field for more snaps. But it was Wan'Dale Robinson who led the entire team in targets here. He had 8, Waller had 7, Slayton had 6, and Hyatt had 4, which is interesting. Maybe they'll use Hyatt some more. But it looks like Wan'Dale Robinson is probably the receiver to own on this team. But the question is, do you really want to own any receivers here? We'll see what's going on with Daniel Jones. I know he missed this game with a neck injury. It was kind of a surprising thing. I've seen a lot of rumors out there on Twitter. Now, listen, none of this is substantiated, but I've seen a lot out there that might suggest, maybe I get too deep in my Reddit rabbit holes, but I've seen a lot out there that might suggest, like, Daniel Jones is one bad knock away from missing the rest of the season, and maybe that's just the cop out here to tank.
He had this
year.
injury
We'll see.
earlier in his career.
But this isn't something that's completely new, and this is something that is more serious than the Giants are letting on. That's all I'm going to say about that. Again, this is unsubstantiated. I don't have boots on the ground. I'm not a journalist, but
they've been pretty adamant he will play next week for what it's worth.
But say he plays and something doesn't go right.
No, I agree. I'm not discounting what you're saying. And I could very well assume the Giants being stupid. I bet you they have some injury policy out there that, hey, get some of this bad contract money back. Let's go. Giants would never do that. That would never happen in the NFL. Stop.
That would never. In the National Football League, no way.
No, nobody would be that callous. A couple of guys that are just under our threshold that you should probably look at, although with all the running back options, might still not consider. There's Jameson Williams, who had his big touchdown reception against the Buccaneers. And there's Smith-Njigba, who finally got involved with the Seahawks and their offense and had done nothing really prior to it.
Yeah, no, Smith-Njigba is interesting, 48% rostered. He ran the same amount of routes as DK Metcalf. I might have mentioned this in the beginning segment, looking at my notes through here. Fair to mention that DK Metcalf briefly exited with a hip injury, then came back into the game, so that could have played a little bit of a role into this. But a lot of times, we're heading into week 7 here. It's time to let some of these rookies loose and see what we got. Maybe that's happening here.
Okay, and then Curtis Samuel as well for the Commanders. I don't know what's going on with Jahan Dotson. It's to the point where I wasn't super invested in him, but I would have cut bait a while ago. There's still Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas has been featured. But it's Curtis Samuel that's now been kind of a critical factor for a couple of weeks in a run.
Exactly. I think we all got enamored with Jahan Dotson's touchdowns last year, and there has been some negative touchdown regression there, of course. But see, here's the thing. Curtis Samuel is 35% rostered. He scored 14-plus PPR points in 3 consecutive games, touchdowns in back-to-back weeks, 19 total targets, of which he's caught 17 in that 3-week span here. I don't think we can just ignore him anymore. And I mentioned Sam Howell a little while, at the beginning as the top quarterback pickup. We have to think of Curtis Samuel as the wide receiver too. It's not a sexy name. It's someone that's been around the league for quite a while, and is always, a little bit of a PPR guy, more short routes than a deep threat, but they like him enough in the red zone. He seems to kind of sneak his way into these seams, and you can't argue with the results of late. So he should be rostered in more than 35% of leagues.
That one receiver, and you can look up his, I guess, roster rate threshold in a little bit here, Jake. That I want to talk about that wasn't on our show sheet. Marvin Mims, and I mentioned it last week with Jim Coventry, and I think it's going to matter even more now. We are entering week 7. The trade deadline, I think, is week 8. It might be week 9. We are 2 weeks away from the Broncos full sailing and full sending their receivers in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. The passing attack has to matter to some extent because their defense is so downright bad. And Marvin Mims can play when he's explosive. I would pick up Rashee Rice first of the receivers, but the next receiver I would be looking at is Marvin Mims if I have a roster spot to stash, because if he gets the opportunity, if Sutton or Jeudy is traded, and I know Steve Smith, the Panthers, would never want that to happen, but if Jeudy were to be traded, Marvin Mims becomes a top 35 fantasy receiver, I think, rest of the season.
Yeah, so this is where I struggle with this, right? Because I think right now I would actually take Curtis Samuel and maybe Smith-Njigba over Mims, but I understand where you're coming from Mims because he has been successful when they give him the ball. The problem is they don't give him the ball. We're looking at the snap sheet here. Not a single target this week here, and Lil Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson both got more snaps, a higher snap share than him. Brandon Johnson ran 10 routes, Humphrey only 4, whereas Mims only ran 7 routes the whole game and wasn't targeted a single time. So,
Jake, I have the answer for you on this one. You don't see it. I put my conspiracy hat off to the side, but it's because the Broncos wanted to feature Jeudy and Sutton so they could get more trade value on a primetime game. And we'll see this week against the Packers when there isn't as many eyes, Marvin Mims is going to be more involved.
Interesting here, but is featuring these guys, Sutton 446 in a score, 3 for 14 for Jeudy.
They do the best they can featuring Jake. We're using that term very loosely.
Yeah, no, I like Marvin Mims as a stash, but I certainly cannot pick him up and start him this week. And I think with the way that
Joe Barry's bad.
Yeah, I know, but with the way that there are plenty of other options here that I feel confident in having a 5-point fantasy floor, 15-point fantasy ceiling, let's say. Marvin Mims has a 0-point fantasy floor, right? So, again, you have to have the luxury of having stash spots. And I do like Marvin Mims. He passes the eye test when I see him get used in these Bronco games. The problem is he's just not getting used for me. So that's why I'd hesitate a little bit. It would have to be the league would basically have to be deep enough for me to consider it. The league would have to be deep enough that he's already rostered. So it's a kind of a catch-22 there in that situation. And before we move on, I do want to say last call on Jameson Williams. Only 3 targets, but he caught 2 of them for 5 and a score against Tampa Bay this week. He is 49% rostered. I don't know about breakout coming through soon here, but if their running game's depleted and they have to spread the ball around a little bit more, I certainly am a believer in what Jameson Williams can do.
I have Jameson Williams at stake league. I would sooner trade him. I don't know what to do. I'm not playing him most weeks, but I do have a pretty deep stable of receivers that could be part.
I think I'm actually going to have to start him this week in my 16-teamer.
Henry Vincent in the chat asks, is it better to pick up Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, or Craig Reynolds? Again, the top running backs this week. I had said Jordan Mason. That was my number one guy, but I'm going back to the comments that you saw Kyle Shanahan make, Jake, on Sunday, suggesting Elijah Mitchell has earned the opportunity, just hasn't stayed healthy. Well, he's going to be theoretically healthy potentially Monday against the Vikings. I'm going Elijah Mitchell over Jordan Mason. I'm going Craig Reynolds over Jordan Mason too, and Mason's my number 3 of those 3 options.
Yeah, that's how I do it. But again, this is an near impossible decision call to make on Tuesday, given they play Monday night. We need to see some injury reports for number 1 McCaffrey and number 2 Mitchell. But yeah, just Google Jordan Mason, top running back Shanahan, or run a Twitter search, or say for something like Elijah's earned a ton. You can see the full thing. It's not too hard to pick up on. That's what led me in that direction.
That's fair. Before we hit the quarterbacks, I'm just going to continue our Look What You Made Me Do Taylor Swift segment, as Taylor Swift is still with Travis Kelce. Quentin Johnston, you're dead to me. Chargers, you're dead to me as well, too. That you couldn't incorporate Quentin Johnston into your game plan after a week bye and needing another receiver. I'm overall sick of just general incompetence as a coaching perspective, Jake. I think more this year than ever before, coaches are just doing dumb things inexplicably for too long of a time, and it has directly hurt the product that I spend far too much of my time talking about, researching, watching, and the Chargers are near the top of that list and have been for years. So you're all dead to me, even though I have to cover you every single week, and it's very frustrating to me. So Quentin Johnston and the Chargers are my Look What You Made Me Do segment for this week.
Yeah, he's definitely a cut, like we alluded to early, and I don't get it, right? You use the 21st overall pick on a guy. Something is happening behind the scenes. Maybe him and Herbert don't get along. Maybe him and the coach don't get along. Whatever is going on here. But if it's not happening now, Herbert, maybe Herbert missed him on the one route where he was wide open. But if he's not happening now, I'm ready to make that drop for someone who would. I would cut Quentin Johnston for Curtis Samuel or Jameson Williams in a heartbeat if you had the chance.
Yeah. Tim J in the chat asks, I have to stream quarterback this week. Who should I take? Howell, Derek Carr, Mayfield, or Russell Wilson? Well, this tees us up perfectly for a great transition because we do need to talk about quarterbacks. So of that, I guess I'll post the question for you, Jake, or people on the video audience. Who of these streaming options do you like the most?
Yeah, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, we're going to try to keep our top 5 at the very top of the show moving forward. The answer for me is Sam Howell, 38% rostered. He is at the Giants. Granted, the Giants defense looked a little bit better against the jet-lag Bills this week, but I wouldn't count on that to keep up for all that long. And I've mentioned in the beginning of the show, so if you're just tuning in, and I pulled this from the Kevin Payne waiver wire column, like I said, multiple waiver wire pieces going out every day on RotoWire here. Sam Howell is averaging more fantasy points per game than Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, and Joe Burrow. We just don't believe it because his name is Sam Howell, right? And we talked about Curtis Samuel, emerging, being effective here. Terry McLaurin, the turf toe. I don't want to say it hasn't slowed him down, but I will say it hasn't slowed him down as much as I originally thought.
Right.
We're not quite getting what we thought we'd get out of Jahan Dotson, but the McLaurin Curtis Samuel is successful, and he's got a great matchup here at the Giants. I'd prefer it a little bit if he were at home, but out of the remaining options, I definitely like Howell. Baker Mayfield, he's 28% rostered, and he's against the Falcons. That's a fine matchup too, but I don't like it as much as Howell. Derek Carr doesn't look great. I was really in on Derek Carr. I thought he was going to be good with this set of receivers is insane. You got Olave, you got Thomas, you got Rashid Shaheed came out with a great game this week. He's only 25% rostered. He's at home against Jacksonville
Thursday. They're part of that Thursday night.
Yeah.
Group
Oh, I hate
games.
that short week.
Yeah.
Oh man. And remember, Carr, even if he's not listed on the injury report, he's just a couple weeks removed from. I spent a ton of FAAB on Jameis everywhere because he had an AC joint sprain that I thought it was going to be toast. So, and I don't trust this offensive line to stop Carr from taking big time hits either. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, you could go Mayfield or Carr if you really wanted to, but I think Sam Howell separates himself from this group of guys by a pretty sizable amount.
I would go Howell, and then I would go Russ Wilson against my Joe Barry Packer defense. And then it would be Mayfield and Carr. However, in a few options, I've had to just consider Carr or Josh Dobbs, as those are literally the only two pickups. I think I'm going Carr, even though he's playing Thursday. That's the level. Like it's Josh Dobbs.
I'm playing Josh Dobbs for Prescott this week in the Dynasty League, unless I can scoop someone up.
Yeah, it's like the Kenny Pickett levels. Josh Dobbs. I'll take Carr over those guys, over like Mac Jones and Tannehill or whatever Titans quarterback starting. I'm taking Carr over that group, but nobody else really. I think from a super flex perspective, it's actually a little bit interesting because you had Malik Cunningham get activated for the Patriots, and all Saturday and Sunday I was having to read tweets and notes about how they're going to get him more involved in the offense, and he's their Taysom Hill, etc. guy, and then the Patriots get curb stomped by the Raiders, and you're like, oh, who really cares?
Well, the thing that was interesting about that whole situation is he was active over Bailey Zupa and Will Greer Zappi. I say Zupa because this one time at the Packer game, this Pats fan behind me insisted that it was pronounced Zupa, and I cannot get that dude out of my head. I know it's Bailey Zappi. Whatever. Okay. But anyway, the fact is that Malik Cunningham was on the active roster. Neither of those other two were. So if anything, that's almost a vote of confidence for Mac Jones because Malik Cunningham, you think of as more of a gadget guy, really. He's not really the quarterback that's going to lead the offense. Maybe Belichick's off the rails and is doing the crazy Charlie Day in the mailroom situation, has this whole new conspiracy to unload on the league that he's been saving this whole time. Or maybe not. But I will say that it wasn't necessarily Mac Jones' fault that they lost this game. Sure, you can blame some of the early play on him, but when they really needed it in crunch time, he threw a perfectly placed ball to Devontae Parker that hit Devontae Parker in the hands and he dropped. It would have got them right at the edge of field goal range, maybe only needed one first down to have a chip shot here. So I don't pin this entire loss here on Mac Jones. He made the throws when they needed him, so I don't know if that's necessarily as much of a he's toast as people are thinking, but I noted it for the two quarterback superflex leagues anyway here. We got to talk about your Baguette guy, right?
Yeah, Baguette, and the reverse of that too. Jimmy Garoppolo and the Raiders are going against the Bears, which could be Brian Hoyer, could be Aiden O'Connell. I wrote in my article that there has to be grass somewhere in your neighborhood that you can cut as opposed to going ahead and watching this game. I think cutting grass. I'm only like 2 years into this dad thing, Jake. So it was on my mind that I just now need to naturally cut grass more. Being a dad, there literally has to be anything better. This is if you are forced to watch a Raiders Bears game. You're like, hey spouse, hey honey, I'm going to put football aside for the early afternoon. I love you so much. Let's go to brunch. I'll take you out for brunch, and you're going to get so many kudos. Because you're helping your mental health, dodging what could be third string Raiders quarterback and second string, but really should be third string Bears quarterback play on a Sunday afternoon.
The over-under on this game is 37.5.
I took the under. In my article, I put under. Yeah. Slam bold that one too.
Mm-hmm. It's going to look a lot like that Badgers-Iowa game on Saturday that I was also at, which, by the way,
I'm sorry.
I don't think I'm going to go to a Wisconsin sports game for quite a while.
I will pay you not to go to
I had game. 2 Brewer losses, Packer loss, Badger loss. I was at all of them. I don't know what the heck's going on here. I used to have such good luck. But anyway, so yeah, that's terrible here. I already gave my little spiel on Daniel Jones, right? Tyrod Taylor played this week, but all indications seem to believe that Daniel Jones will be back for as ever long as he lasts. Got to hit the Browns. We didn't know until the weekend, really, that it would be P.J. Walker stepping up for Deshaun Watson. Of course, P.J. Walker comes in and beats the 49ers. What an NFL script that was. Trevor Lawrence is day-to-day with a knee injury. I don't think he seems super threatened not to play.
They play Thursday.
They do play Thursday. C.J. Beathard is the backup there. So those are the 2 quarterback notes for this week.
Yeah, let's just hope that Trevor Lawrence plays. I think he will. It doesn't sound like there's too threatening of it, but that's a tough option of super flex quarterbacks out there. From a tight end perspective, we had mentioned Jonnu Smith last week. Kyle Pitts getting involved again. Desmond Ridder plays the Buccaneers this week. I would sooner assume the Ridder offensive explosion ends with that Buccaneers defense, and it's also at Tampa Bay. But, Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts continue to be interesting options. You mentioned Michael Mayer at the top of the show, and we finally got to him here. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I thought in the Packers game, and the few receptions he got, I think he had 3 for 37 or thereabouts. He looked really explosive, quicker and faster.
He's earning his touches. And now he's finally getting them.
This week too.
Season high was 6 targets, 5 catches, 75 yards, all season high. Well, career highs, right? Because we got a rookie. I think he is probably one of the more like I said, I had him in my top 5 overall pickups this week here because the tight end situation is tough. And he is. I'm going to double check to see if I can still grab him in my 16-teamer because I'll use the top waiver priority on him. Yeah,
he's been involved. Austin Hooper was previously blocking his way. Why we had to even pretend like that should happen in the first place is, once again, back to my look what you made me do segment in terms of bad coaching and just stupid choices. But thanks, NFL, for making our job a little bit easier because Michael Mayer should be a top pickup. Luke Musgrave, again, going against the Broncos defense. I'm having to drop him due to roster constraints, but I hope many don't have to because next week might be the best sell high point because he's already passed his bye week as well.
See, while you're dropping him, I'm actually flexing him in a couple situations here, right? He's down to 18% rostered. He's coming off. Obviously, they had a bye, and I think he had 6 catches against the Raiders. It was all short yardage, but it was...
seems like too many, but he was involved, and he has been involved often. To your point.
Okay, I'm going to double check on that quick. But my point here is that Denver is dead last in the league in terms of fantasy points to allowed to tight ends in standard formats, and they're the 3rd worst in PPR formats. So Denver is the play. I started Tyler Conklin against Denver a couple weeks ago when I had to, and he got me 7 fantasy points. Okay, whatever. Musgrave's a lot better than Conklin, right? And let's take a look here. Before the bye week against the Raiders, Musgrave caught 6 of 7 targets, only for 34 yards. But there's something here, right? I'm going to come out and call right now. His first touchdown of the season happens this week against the Broncos.
Okay, I like that. I actually like that bet. I'm down for you on that one.
This is Musgrave's time here for sure. So I know we've beat him all year, and it's been very minimal mixed results. We seem to talk about this guy every week, either before the year as a sleeper or during the year. Why is he so low rostered? We might seem like homers here, but I actually really think that his first touchdown of the year comes this week. It's time.
Any other tight ends before we get to the streaming defenses?
Wanted to stick Taysom Hill in there. I don't love it, but he did catch 7 passes for 49 yards on a season high, 8 targets while also completing a 4-yard pass. A lot of this has to do with Juwan Johnson being out for the Saints. So Taysom Hill is tight end option if you need it.
Okay. Streaming defenses, we really only have a few questions, so I'll key those up while you break down the streaming defensive calls.
All right, so this is one where I'm going to stray a little bit from our main writer on the site here. I think the Browns, even though they're on the road, they're at Indy, they're only 28% rostered. They are the number 1 defense, not just because they have a good matchup this week against Gardner Minshew, but because if they can shut down the 49ers, they can shut down anybody. I think Payne might have mentioned that in his article as well. So even though they might not have the best matchup this week alone, I'm going to pick up the Browns, and I'm just going to leave them sit in my lineup. Right, because they have plenty of playmakers. They have, a great defensive front that'll get sacks. And, it's just a low floor, low maintenance option here. And I'm going to, pick up the Browns, leave them in the lineup here. Again, they're at Indianapolis here. So I have them number 1. My ranking number 2, this is also Jerry's number 2. We got the Raiders. Now, they're 47% rostered, so they're really close. But they're at Chicago. And, of course, you got Bagant there, Tyler Bagant for the Bears. Who knows what this Bears offense looks like without Justin Fields? Both of these teams are going to be terrible. But what I do know, out of everything in that Monday night game that I went to and saw in person, one of my huge takeaways is that Max Crosby is a menace, and that is going to propel the Raiders defense and help their fantasy floor as well on a week-to-week basis. So at Chicago, I don't care if they're on the road. Give me that 37-point over/under. That's only going to probably keep creeping down as the week goes down. It looks like Daniel Jones will be back. I was slightly interested in the Washington Commanders at 31%. At the Giants here, but if Daniel Jones is back, I'm slightly less in that. And one that flew past my radar that I didn't see, but if you want a home team, all those teams I mentioned were on the road. Sometimes when you're streaming, you want the home team. Jerry actually ranks the Seahawks number 1. They're only 2% rostered in Yahoo leagues and they are home against Arizona. So, for example, I have Miami, and Miami's had
Eagles.
a hit. Yep, and they've had a pretty solid week, but I'm definitely cutting Miami this week when they play the Eagles and taking a look at these streaming options here. So that's how I'm handling it this week.
I think I would take the Browns #1 over the against the Colts, and I don't know if I feel quite the same way. The Browns' schedule is going to be difficult over the next couple weeks.
But they're 28%. I think you can set it and forget it, and that's you can stop streaming defenses if you pick up the Browns, and that's attractive enough for me.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, but I would pick them up this week. I think the Seahawks is #2 because Josh Dobbs has kind of fallen off from the Cardinals' perspective. Seahawks are favored by 8. It's in Seattle. I thought that was kind of a high spread if you believed the Cardinals were competent, and I guess Vegas does not think so. So something to point out. I have a few questions for you, and I guess I'll start first with one that I was more or less answering, Jake. But this rounds out to the flex perspective. Who would you rather start at flex? You got Zay Flowers or Calvin Ridley this week. Again, Jacksonville plays Thursday against the Saints, and the Ravens. Boy, the Ravens are playing another difficult team. The Lions in Baltimore, coming off their London trip.
Man, this is really tough. I actually have a similar dilemma in one of my leagues where it's Ridley, Flowers, Godwin, and Nico Collins, and I can only start 3 of them or something like that.
Yeah.
Man. It's a good problem to have. I think that Calvin Ridley's ceiling on a week-to-week basis is higher. Now, granted,
I'm still starting Calvin Ridley too.
Yes, and it is getting. My mind could easily change on this if Zay Flowers has another excellent week because Zay Flowers
Christian Kirk would play in the slot, right? And then Marshawn Lattimore by default is covering Calvin Ridley on the outside more. Maybe maybe that's as simple as that. You don't want to be covered by Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And it is worth noting that Zay Flowers leads all Ravens receiving options in snap share and route run percentage and air yards and basically every metric that you can think of. Zay Flowers is wide receiver 1 for Lamar Jackson, and he is absolutely someone that you're fortunate to have in fantasy. But I'm still leaning Ridley here. I don't think I can move off him yet.
Sticking in Baltimore, Lyndon Orphans asks, are we bailing on Keaton Mitchell? Of course, Keaton Mitchell was activated off injured reserve last week, had been previously tossed around. We had mentioned him maybe 2 weeks ago because Adam Schefter had reportedly talked about him, or Reddit ran wild with it, much like they did with Will Levis going #1 overall. It was one of those scenarios. Keaton Mitchell's really fast and might be good. Ravens offense, I don't know what I feel about them, and it's not like they're playing Keaton Mitchell much in London anyway.
Yeah,
there's a lot of running backs that I want to roster this week, and I think Keaton Mitchell, unfortunately, becomes one that I would cut, hoping that we don't have to talk about him next week. That would be my goal.
No, I mean, yeah. So the answer to the question is yes. I guess I'd bail on Keaton Mitchell. They seem to be confident enough in Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. So that that's enough for me. If I have to eat crow and use a high FAAB bid on him in a couple weeks, I'm fine. But I can't confidently grab him and start him over any of these other running backs that we talked about on the entire show. And guess what? 6 teams on bye. You need to flex this week, and it shouldn't be Mitchell.
Last question, Jake. I guess I don't even know which side Luke is asking here, but I'm curious. Would you rather have DeAndre Hopkins rest of season or Devonta Smith rest of season?
I think even though Devonta Smith is trending downwards as well, I don't think he's sinking quite as fast as DeAndre Hopkins here because I don't understand why Hopkins isn't getting more targets. I watched a little too much of that Tennessee game that I care to admit. He's definitely getting open, right? That's not the problem here. But poor quarterback play is going to continue to be an issue for him. And then what happens when the Titans decide that they're no longer competing or they go to the rookie? Does DeAndre Hopkins really want to be a part of that? There was also I think this was taken a little out of context, but there was also a funny Twitter video of the guy that muffed the punt came and sat down next to DeAndre Hopkins on the bench, and Hopkins scooted up and ran out of there. Didn't even want to sit next to him on the bench. I think it was close to halftime, so I don't know if you want to.
Hopkins isn't going to force his way out because he already looks like a fool for having signed with the Titans anyway. He just wanted the bag. We all agreed that was the case.
Yes,
and so I don't think he can. He's too proud of the guy. Maybe I'm wrong on this. He's too proud to leave that scenario. Again,
he's a future Hall of Famer, right? Can we settle on that at this stage? I think he's a Hall of Famer. But as far as rest of the season this year, even if Devonta Smith is the clear second fiddle to A.J. Brown, which I think has proven and come to fruition over the last couple of weeks, we're going to get more productive games and probably maybe even more targets out of Devonta Smith than than we are Hopkins. So I would take the Devontae Smith side.
Just to illustrate this a little bit further, we saw Malik Willis last season as the Titans quarterback, and I think we'll see it again for this season at certain points. At most 8 completed passes. You can't do anything fantasy-wise. Even if Hopkins is getting all 8, you can't do anything fantasy-wise when an offense can only get 8 completed passes. And the Titans have said on multiple occasions, both by the depth chart, by preseason games, and elsewhere, Malik Willis is better than Will Levis. We think Malik Willis is better than Will Levis. So if that says anything to you, that's as defining as it possibly can to me. I would much rather have Devonta Smith.
And I'll throw this out here with Tannehill. He does have the right high ankle sprain, right? Except it's not expected to require surgery. But yikes, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, of Malik Willis for DeAndre Hopkins. I am going to have a tough decision to make. It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins or Jameson Williams or waiver wire moving forward, and I think it's going to end up being Jameson Williams. It's probably time to bench D-Hop.
Jay, can I get a real quick look on Twitter since mine isn't pulled up? Somebody had asked, thoughts on Julio to the Eagles. Am I assuming Julio Jones? Did that just break while we were doing our show today? Julio Jones to the Eagles, or is that just not even a thing?
This literally happened 21 seconds ago.
So Julio Jones is signing with the Eagles?
Yeah, signing with the Eagles. Oh, you know what else just happened? The Packers signed James Robinson.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. Neither of those have any fantasy impact, I think.
Yeah,
so we can
I would sooner assume that I could be fantasy relevant than Julio Jones to the Eagles. Literally does nothing at all. Please tweet me every roster that picks up Julio Jones, because those need to be put on like the terrorist watch for fantasy football. Do not have those people in any fantasy leagues moving forward.
I just don't think there's any way there
Jones
can be any upside out of that. You might as well have Antonio Brown resign.
The only way that helps people is for Madden Ultimate Team. If you play that, you get his legend chemistry. That's great.
Okay,
now I know you've already tuned me out. It's esports talk. Yeah, we're great.
Yeah, okay. No. So I have no interest in Julio Jones. And to a lesser extent, I have no interest in James Robinson from a fantasy perspective. That's interesting. They signed James Robinson. I hope that means Aaron Jones isn't more hurt than they're letting
that
on.
Means Patrick Taylor is as bad as we actually thought he was.
All right, fair enough. We can live with that.
All right, that does it for us in the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire podcast. Again, let us know how you like the top 5 edition, if we should continue to do that moving forward. I hope a lot of yeses, because I don't think we're really changing our minds on that one. And we'll be back in next week, hopefully with less running backs, but more defined running backs to discuss. Again, best of luck in your fantasy lineups.